Welcome to the second of my videos looking at my top 150 albums of all time. I'm going to cover albums from 140 to 131 in this video. So let's get started with the album that I placed at 140, and it's by Aretha Franklin, and it's called Lady Soul. Very difficult to select one of Aretha's albums from a glut of five-star material, but I've chosen this one mainly because of the Carole King song, A Natural Woman, which I find absolutely riveting, particularly when we consider what songs she's covered. So that's my first selection at 140. At 139 is an album that probably none of you have heard of. It's by an artist called Martin Carr, and it's, I think, his second album, and it's called The Breaks. Now, some of you fans from England may be familiar with Martin Carr. He was basically the leader, songwriter, and guitar player from a band from the 90s called the Boo Radleys. I heard them on John Peel, and I started getting their albums maybe a decade back. So, not at the time. But anyway, this is a really first class album, very sort of Britpop style. Great little lyrics, great stories to his songs, and a peach of a pop album, I would suggest. And you might want to listen to the Santa Fe Skyway to get you started. So that's my 139 selection. It's Martin Carr and his album The Breaks from 1993. Okay, 138 then is the album released in 1999 by Morrissey called You Are the Quarry. Now, Morrissey has continued throughout his solo career to release five-star albums, four-star albums. He's never really released a dud, but it's awfully difficult once again to choose one of his. But I chose this one because I like the politics, of course, and there's some outstanding tracks on this album, particularly Irish Blood, English Heart, which is a song he performs live, and it very much sort of hints at the problems in Northern Ireland back in the 80s and where Morrissey stood on it. So that's my 138. It's Morrissey. It's We Are. You are the quarry, not we are. You are the quarry. Reference to working class fighting for their rights, and it's at 138. Okay, at 137 is an album released at the turn of the millennium in 2000. It's called Lost Souls, and it was the debut album by a Manchester-based band, The Doves. Now, I've got all the Doves albums, and what I particularly like is that sort of amalgam of guitar with keyboard, and it's very got a psychedelic feel to it. They're not a heavy rock band, and they're not a sort of indie band, really. They're sort of they're very much into guitar sounds and some lovely songs on this debut, which I consider to be their best. Get to listen to them. They're called The Doves, and this album that I've selected at 137 is called Lost Souls. Still a personal favourite. So to 136, the 1991 debut by the London-based, well, he's probably not London-based now, but London-born artist called Seal. Now, for those of you old enough to remember, around about 1990, Seal set the place on fire with his appearances on Top of the Pops, and this debut album really was such a huge hit. And I remember trickling along to discos and propping the bar up and watching the feminine film in many examples, gyrating to his songs with particular reference to Killer, Crazy, and Future Love Happiness. It still stands up, this album, and I really reckon that if you haven't heard it, get it on and possibly get up there and do a bit of disco dancing. It's a perfect sort of opportunity to really feel good. So that's the debut album by Seal, released in 1991, and it's at 136 in my countdown. 135 is an album that was released in 1986. It was by a band called the Redskins, and it's called Neither Washington Nor Moscow, a very political album. A little bit of background. In the mid 80s, there was a lot of political activity going on, particularly the miners' strike, and of course, the fight to get Nelson Mandela released in South Africa after all those years imprisoned. Uh, you know, so I went along to quite a number of open air concerts in London that were basically making a statement. Saw Paul Weller there, for example. But when I went up to a Rock Against Racism stroke miners' strike event on a Saturday in, I think it was the South Bank, I saw this band called the Redskins, and they were sort of punk, but they were punk with a lot of attitude, and they were better players than Sex Pistols and the Damned. They had more talent on their instrumentation, but their lyrics left nothing to the imagination. They were into left wing revolution, and I absolutely love this album, and that's why I've got to put it in my top 150 of all time. Again, released in 1986, called Neither Washington Nor Moscow. The title tells you everything about the high power politics. This sadly was the only release by them. They sort of disappeared after this. But anyway, it's in my countdown and it's at 135. In at 134, an album released in 1991, and it's by Queen and it's called Innuendo. Of course, this was really their last release before the tragic death of Freddie Mercury from AIDS, and you can tell this. And I absolutely love this album. The title track is great. I'm going slightly mad, which you have to be to listen to it. But the piece de resistance is These Are the Days of Our Lives, sang poetically by Freddie with some juicy Brian May guitar. And it's in at 134, it's Queen and Innuendo. Um, I might have another Queen album further down the line, but I'm not spoiling you by telling it now. So that's it. 133 is the first debut album by Tom Petty called Full Moon Fever. It was released in 1989, and it's just an album full of hits. Of course, he wasn't really on his own here because Mike Campbell from the Heartbreakers was involved, as were Benoit Tench on a few tracks. But it was at a time when Tom was involved with the Travelling Wilburys, with Jeff Lynne and, of course, Roy Orbison and George Harrison. So I think they pop up on the odd track on this, but it's an absolutely fantastic album full of hits, as I say. Running Down a Dream, Free Falling, um, lots of them there that you can bury yourself in. And as far as I'm concerned, it was really a Tom Petty and Heartbreakers album, but a big input from Jeff Lynne, and what a genius he is, of course. So it's at 133. It's by Tom Petty. It's called Full Moon Fever, released in 1989, and that's concludes my chit chat on that. Okay, 132 now. In 1989, I managed to get to listen to an album by ex-Talking Head David Byrne, and it signalled his arrival as a solo artist. But this was like no other debut that you've ever heard before. The title of the album was Rio Momo, and David decided that he was going to tell the world about his love for world music by doing an album with the numerous genres that you can hear if you visit Central and South America. And it's a wonderfully rhythmic album, and I really, really like it. I still find it difficult to match it really from his solo career, although I'm a great fan of David Byrne, and all of his releases certainly get into my ears. But this Rio Momo is absolutely fantastic. You know, we've got Moringa, Samba, and all those other concoctions in South America, those styles of Latin music. So there we have it. That's my 132. It's David Byrne's debut, and it's called Rio Momo, and it was released in 1989. In 1988, I decided to take a year out, left work. My mother had died. She'd given me some money, bless her heart, and I decided to actually use it to travel. Never regretted it. And I took along a new girlfriend who became my wife on my travels. Won't go into too much detail, but what I will say is, whilst I was in Australia, I started to hear this band on the radio, and they were on the radio all the time. And their name was Midnight Oil. They had released an album in 1987, and it was called Diesel and Dust. And it's got the infamous track that opens the album called Beds Are Burning, which is a political stance by Peter Garrett, the lead singer, about the disastrous way that Aborigines, the indigenous population in Australia, had been treated by the British uh, foreigner, as I put it. Although they're Australian now, they were foreigners. And Pete Garrett was very much a staunch advocate for Aboriginal rights. So anyway, I then travelled on to Bali, and whilst I was getting acclimatised to the culture shock, we also used to spend quite a bit of time on the beach. And there were lots and lots of pirate cassettes on sale. And guess what? I bought Diamond Dust, and I played it and I played it and I played it. A great second track as well, after Beds Are Burning, Throw Down the Weapon. And the whole album really does shift. So that's my selection at 131. It's by Midnight Oil. It's called Diesel and Dust, and I love it. Okay, that concludes my second video here, tracing my selections from 140 to 131. I hope you enjoyed it. And of course, if you're watching this on Rumble, every selection will have at least one audio added to my chat.